Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. I have another fantastic show planned out for you today. I'm very excited. We have a number of guests. John, welcome back. Chad, welcome back. Clay, welcome back. We got a whole crew here. It's going to be great. Very excited. But before we get into anything, I just want to remind everybody make sure you like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your email in the morning every day that we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, just as a quick heads up, none of us are doctors. Anything we do say is our own personal experience. And if you have any thoughts about it, by all means, do your own research. Check it out, look it up. If you have any questions or comments for the show itself, hit us up in the comment section. We'll be able to put them up on the screen, discuss them live as we go. Any thoughts or initial comments from the crew before we dive into the conversation? Everybody good? All right, cool. So, what we are going to be doing, we're going to be talking about the bridges of empathy. We're going to be talking about empathy in general, but what empathy can do and how it can bridge a lot of things. So right off the bat, I'm going to give a definition of what empathy is, and then we'll pass it around and we'll go from there. So what I have right now is empathy is the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another, which I think is a very interesting definition. I have another one here that I wanted to hit as well. It's the act of imagining one's ideas, feelings, or attitudes as fully inhabiting something observed, such as a work of art or natural occurrence, which I think is also a neat way to look at it. But I'm going to go to you, Johnny, here. We'll go hit you first. What are your initial thoughts on empathy? I'm just going to unmute you
Everybody
real quick.
appreciate the both definitions. I've never really looked at it from the lens of the second. Um, the way that it really works for me, and the way that I try to teach it to our men and women, is it's really empathy as a skill. Empathy is a skill that can be practiced and increased the same way it can be in the gym with our reps, on the range with our weapon, in the gym with jujitsu or combat sport that many of you on this call are really into. But empathy is a skill that can be practiced, and I really define it simply as feeling with someone. Let me try to explain it very clearly. Feeling with someone. Clay and I have become very fast friends over the last couple of years. He's my brother. I love him and I respect him. If Clay is in the valley, right, the proverbial valley, the empathetic person grabs a rope, gets down into that valley with Clay. Uh, I want to feel what Clay is feeling as much as he'll allow me to. As a mental health professional, as a performance coach, I want to be able to feel what he's feeling in that valley. That's empathy. The sympathetic person uh, is going to yell down to Clay from the top of that valley. That person isn't going to get on the rope and climb down. They're going to reach their head over. They're going to look down. They're going to yell down to Clay, Clay, you doing all right down there? Man, I feel bad for you. Can I throw you a sandwich? That's sympathy in action. The empathetic person is going to throw a rope down, going to get down there with Clay and feel with him.
Mm,
So, really, it is about feeling with another person. It is a skill. It's a skill that can be practiced.
I love that. I love that a lot. Let's go with Chad. What are your initial thoughts on empathy?
I mean, empathy for me, as you know, just through my healing journey these last 3 years, has been
Mm-hmm.
something I've totally started taking on and realizing and looking at it from a different lens. Someone that has a bad day or might be rude or something like that, I don't immediately get defensive anymore. It's more or less like, okay, what's going on in this person's life? What happened to them today to put them in such a bad mood, kind of a thing. So I'm more or less, if now that knowing where I was for the last 20 plus years of being in the gray and feeling the yuck and living in that, I immediately understand empathy now and try to lead with that, and lead from a place of, you know, wearing their shoes, I guess you'd say, right? Putting myself in their place and understanding, what their crux of the day might be. So really, it used to be a back burner for me. I didn't care. It was pull up your boots and get things done. Now it's a, what happened to you and how can I assist you and how can I make your day easier on you, kind of a deal. I completely look at it in a different range now.
It makes a lot of sense. Clay, what about yourself?
Yeah, and not to add to Johnny's, um, way of putting it, it's something that I feel is a powerful tool that human beings have, and it's a perishable tool. To be able to imagine or contemplate what it is like to be like someone else or something else is a very powerful tool to have. And I think sometimes we kind of take it for granted that we have it, that we have that ability to wonder what, this guy cuts me off in front of the, on the highway or whatever. Instead of being angry, if you were to imagine what it would be like for that person to be that angry in that moment to risk their own life to just get one car ahead of me, instead of being angry, it's a skill and a practice that, like Johnny said, but I think it's often underutilized. Um,
Mm.
so yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Underutilized. Sean, what are your initial thoughts on empathy?
Well, when I saw the rock concert poster come out and I saw Bridges of Empathy, I thought, I wonder if I've got much of it at all. But I'm told that I do. I mean, Seb Lavoie says I've got it in spades. But as I was thinking about it, I was trying to figure out, do I, don't I? In fact, that's how just before we entered into this live, I was saying, boys, I don't know, empathy, sympathy, I don't know. Maybe I don't understand the difference. Maybe I just don't understand the subject. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. And so, as I was thinking about Bridges of Empathy when we kicked off the conversation, I was still struggling to what does this mean to me? What does that Bridges of Empathy mean? And if it hadn't been for Johnny talking about throwing a rope down and then me seeing the rope as the bridge. Now, the rope isn't the rope is the bridge. And I feel that if I've got one end of the rope and maybe it's Clay that's down in the bottom and I'm throwing a rope down there, that's now the bridge. I can stay at my end of the bridge and convince Johnny to climb up the rope. Or I can throw down the rope and I can climb down the bridge to Clay. That rope, that bridge is for me to determine how I want to use it, and that rope or bridge is for Clay to decide how he wants to use it. Neither of us have to say a freaking word. I can walk up to the edge of that, throw a rope down, nod at Clay, and he'll figure the rest out. Or, as I'm throwing it down, I can, hey Clay, grab a rope. I'll pull as you climb. So we can figure it out together. But as I was considering the rope being the bridge, how I feel I've worked mostly is if I've got empathy, like I feel what I feel. But I think a lot of it is cognitive rather than emotional empathy. So the way my cognitive abilities work is I patternize things and I start understanding maybe what the person is going through in more of a cognitive way, like my cognitive, not their cognitive. And rather than a full emotional connection and now I'm feeling all of their feels, I think that in my life I've spent more time cognitively empathetic rather than emotionally empathetic. Maybe that's because of my military career and how you kind of got to strip some of those emotions out to do some of those jobs. And I defaulted more to a cognitive sense. But that's my first shot across the bow on the topic, as it were.
Hmm. John, you got any thoughts on what Sean just mentioned?
I always have lots of thoughts on what Sean shares because he's very, very cerebral, extremely well spoken. What comes to mind for me, based on Sean's response, is when you talk about the cognition and not getting into the feels with another human being, very normal, natural human response. It's because we draw on our own experiences, and so when we talk about cognition for Sean, I would imagine it for all of us, the stories of our life form that narrative around what that other person might be going through. It's very normal, very natural, and it's a great way to sort of bridge the gap between what a person is going through and any potential supports you may be able to provide them. And that's based on your experience. One of the things that I think can really help, especially for, let's just take a person like me, right, who is the non-veteran of this group, right? But my whole life, my work is spent with warfighters like Clay and like the rest of you. And one of the things that was unbelievably helpful for me in entering your world was learning the skill of, because I didn't have those specific experiences to draw from. I was not going to be disingenuous with my brothers and sisters and pretend to know where they've been and what they've done and how they feel, right? And so we can learn the skill of empathy by asking questions and holding space. I am not the expert on any human being. Human beings are the experts on themselves, but everybody wants to feel heard. Every human being. My job, our job in being empaths is not to fix anyone. I just want to feel right next to them. I want them to let me in any way that is comfortable for them so that we can walk the road together.
I like that. Chad, your nod, you got some thoughts on that?
No, I was just going to take a break and let John and Sean just drive this bus. They both got some good info, so I was just going to sit here and learn. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one thing I've kind of rephrased in my mind, when I run across someone that's having a bad day, we'll just put it that way, is, instead of, what's wrong with you, is what happened to you. Right? Because we've had things that happen to us that create these reactions. And I never really looked at it before until I started dealing with my own stuff, right? And once I started dealing with my own stuff, I could look at things from a different scope and a different manner, and again, be more empathetic to people because I was there, I was in that gray. And so just asking those questions, and like I said, you can't lead them to water, but you can give them a handhold, or you can give them that piece of rope to say, hey, I'm here to help, but you also got to dig in, you got to help yourself too. So I think there's a slight line there that you got to play some sympathy, some empathy, but they also got to put some work in as well.
Absolutely. Clay, you got any points to add onto this?
Yeah, so this is great because for me, I really resonate with what Sean said. So cognitive versus emotional. That's a really interesting point. I really like that. Because I believe I'm very similar to Sean as well, where I'm more cognitively empathetic than I am necessarily emotionally empathetic. Not saying that I'm not also emotionally empathetic, but when you put those together, it kind of makes me think about the idea that maybe the bridge of empathy is combining both your cognitive and your emotional empathy to relate to the person that, like Johnny said, he doesn't know what it's like, but he wants to. So how do you bridge that? You use your cognitive and your emotional empathy to try to think about, hey, what would it be like to be going through what that person's going through, so that you can either hold the rope so they can come out of the valley, or you can go down there with them depending on the severity of whatever it is that they're experiencing and going through.
It's an interesting point. I'm wondering too, because we're talking about empathy in a kind of a consistently negative connotation, right? Like, bad days or horrible things or being in the valley. Or does it apply the same to the positive side of it as well? When someone, I think as a great example is, when you see one of your friends succeed, right? And you can be empathetic, but it also can sometimes turn into, almost a degradation of that friendship as well. When people can look at it and like, oh, that guy's doing better than I am. Dang, right? And you're not really being empathetic in that moment. Or if you guys know what I'm talking about, I just want to hit on that. Can it really be both sides of it? Is it more just trying to bridge the gap between a negative emotion to a positive one? John, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. It's what I love about these discussions. There's so much that Chad shared and Clay did and Sean did that I think is worth going back to as well. But what you just made me think of, Chance, is like everybody wants to see you do well, but never better than them. That's sort of rooted in our psyche. I think empathy as a skill, if it is a skill, right? It's only a skill if it holds up under pressure. And so in my mind, it's also a choice, right? And if it's a choice, then it's situational. Clay is my brother. We have history now. So the amount of choice that I'm going to exercise in being empathetic with Clay will extend for me across the continuum of Clay's journey, good, bad, and everything in between, right? I believe he has earned that with me, and I certainly hope I have earned that with him. And so in the context of the question you asked, brother, for me, it is not only to, we've used the term bridge a lot. It is not only to walk the road with Clay in times of trouble or conflict, but man, it's also time for me to put my ego aside and to feel with him in his moments of greatness, even if parts of us as human beings and as men, man, shit, I wish that was happening to me.
Watch the language.
I wish that was happening to me. Right.
Yeah.
It is being able to check the ego and go, I want to feel all of this joy with him. He has earned all of this joy and I want to feel it with him. So I believe, to answer your question, brother, I believe, yes, it's a skill that can be practiced across our entire lives, not just when we are in that proverbial valley.
I like that. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do. There's so many ways.
Of course he does.
To have this conversation. So, I was thinking about maybe just not to take it in a completely different direction, but just to play with it a little bit. We're all, this panel is all familiar enough with BJJ that we understand when someone gets on top mount, when you top mount someone in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's considered to be a pretty powerful position. Unless the guy on the bottom is a really good player. When you're in top mount, if the bottom player is really good, you've got a problem on top mount. And that's just the way it is. It depends on skill sets. It depends on talents. It depends on a lot of things that the person standing on top of the hole in the ground, we'll call it a cave, that is throwing a rope down to their friend, that person who's on top looking down at the person below, in our minds up until just a few seconds ago, we were all thinking that the guy on top was the guy with the solution. But that's not always the case. Maybe the guy on top thinks he's throwing the rope down to help a friend, but the friend who's in the quote-unquote hole is the person who's going to help the person on top the most. And how I kind of came to that maybe consideration is sometimes a person who steps up and is throwing the rope down, maybe they just don't know how to manage a rope. Maybe the rope is all coiled around their feet. Maybe they're standing in the pile of rope as they throw that rope down. And as the person in the cave reaches up and grabs that rope and does their first yank to test to see if it's secure, it freaking pulls the other person down into the cave and they land on their silly head right next to you. And so the empathetic portion of it sometimes can be skewed in the sense of who's helping who. At first blush or first glance or first stroke of the brush, you might think that if you've got the brush, you're the artist, but maybe that isn't the case. Maybe the paper is the art. You know what I mean?
There is so much there. But I'm going to shut up for right now. I'm gonna shut up intentionally because this is an awesome crew.
We'll come back to that for sure. I was actually just thinking that as you said that, Sean, is that I heard a sculptor once say was that he's not the artist. The piece of art is he's just releasing the art from the block of stone. He's not actually doing anything other than releasing it. Chad, you got any thoughts so far?
Man, I'm just watching this pickleball match going back and forth with John and Sean, and I'm just trying to soak it all in, man. I love it.
Dude, Chad, I gotta call you offline, man. This is
He's got great lines.
He sure does. Holy cow.
No, it's good, right? It's one of the things I love about being part of the collective group, right, is just learning from everybody's individual experiences and adding those to my rucksack or whatnot that I can continually to carry on with me. One thing on the empathy thing was that big conference I went to in Denver. There's a couple SF guys that came by the Mental Joe booth, and we started talking about just mental health, and a couple of them broke down. And these are big dudes, they're tier 1 dudes, like Sean and the rest of the crew, and I'm sitting here, I didn't know what to do, and I just lean over and I just grab this dude and hug him and let him just kind of let loose and let go. And at that point in time, that was the bridge I could do. Right. I was able to just hold space for that human being, allow them to let go. And these are big, gnarly, tough dudes, that are expressing these emotions of losing buddies to suicide because of mental health issues that we have. So seeing that and knowing that just being there to hold space and hold somebody, it's wild. But like I said, I don't even have the degree of knowledge that Sean and John are kicking back and forth on the pickleball court, man. So I'm loving it. I'm just soaking it in. So
Hanging out in the back corner, right?
that's it.
Clay, you got any thoughts on anything so far?
Yeah, just a little bit. I'm still kind of in that zone of the positive aspects of empathy, and that was an interesting question, because you do generally think about that something unfortunate is happening, and then there's empathy. But like you guys were saying, if someone's doing something great, say in my experiences, they win a jiu-jitsu match or they win a fight, and you want to be with them in that moment of positivity and feel it with them. But the point was brought up of how in those moments that empathy could lead to jealousy or some form of negative feelings within the person that feels empathy. So then you start to think, well, maybe empathy is the vehicle that can facilitate self-awareness for a person, if they're so inclined, right? Not a lot of people are self-aware. So if I'm feeling empathy and I'm self-aware, I'll notice in my moment of feeling good for this person, say Johnny wins the fight, I'm feeling also a little bit of jealousy. Now you have a vehicle to navigate yourself a little bit of, okay, why am I feeling jealousy that something good's happening to John? And it kind of teeters this or that vehicle of empathy needs to be practiced. And you can see, oh, maybe I do feel a little jealousy, but you know what? I'm going to practice feeling good for this person right now. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to practice his moment for him. And then that's what that is. That's what the empathy does. It gives you that ability to choose to either go down the negative path or learn something a little bit about yourself in those moments.
I like that a lot. Johnny, let's go back to some thoughts you had earlier. I know you're holding off, but let's hit on.
No, I just the discussion is, I think, so valuable for all people. Chad shared something about the moment at a conference in Denver at his booth, and for the people listening, like or how it hit me viscerally. There is no better example, I don't think, than what we are talking about, right? This notion that it has to be a set of skills that are clearly defined from one situational context to the next is just not true. And it's okay not to know, right? And where Chad's head and heart took him in that moment was, I don't know what to do in this moment, but he knew exactly what to do. And there isn't this idea that it is right or wrong. It is the idea that we choose to step into it in a way that is most authentic for us. How it is received, that hug or those words of affirmation or man, I'm going to love you right now by pushing you. I'm going to love you right now by going through this misery with you, because that is the only way that we get to some peace and to some growth. There's so many different ways that we can practice this in our lives. And this idea that we have to have been born an empath. Sean talked about wrestling with, I really don't know. I don't know uh, where I align with all of this. And when Sean was talking about his examples of the person that may or may not throw the rope down and what their own situation was, I think that is critically important. And Clay just touched on it a little bit too. When we look at who we are, truly who we are as individuals, right? And what our threshold is. And the notion that empathy fatigue is a very real thing. It's a very real thing. I can't give to Chad, to Sean, to Clay, to Chance. I can't give you all what I don't have. And a lot of us, and especially a lot of you guys that were indoctrinated and raised up in a war culture and in a military culture where, man, the only thing that matters is our brother to our right of us and to our left of us. That's what matters most. You were never able to practice what it meant to really take care of yourself from an empathetic and a mental health component, because it was always about mission readiness and bringing your brothers home safely. But Sean really made me think about, maybe the person that is trying to empathize with us just isn't our flavor, and that's okay too, right? And the other thing that I think we maybe didn't touch on that Sean highlighted for me is, who says that person down in the bottom of the valley doesn't need to be there right now, hasn't chosen to be there right now, and maybe needs to navigate that alone. And so it brings up a whole nother set of skills around empathy, which is to eliminate assumptions and to ask and not assume, right? Here's the clearest example I can give you all. We all learned how to mourn death when we were children, right? My first experiences in mourning death were I watched how my family went to wakes and funerals. And I listened to everybody in the receiving line say the same thing, which is, I'm really sorry for your loss, or some variation of that, right? I'm really sorry. I'm very sorry for your loss. Well, I would ask you guys if this sounds different. I walk up to a wake just a couple of weeks ago. I look at my friend who lost his father and I say, brother, I can't imagine how you're feeling right now. I can't even begin to imagine how you're feeling. Know that I love you, and I will be here every step of the way in any way that you'll have me.
Yeah.
So I just think it's important, to go back to what Sean said. It is not our responsibility as human beings to save everyone from themselves. And sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves and ask, am I the right person that should be fast roping to the bottom of this valley right now? Or am I the right person that should even be throwing the rope right now? Maybe I'm not. And that's okay too.
I think that's a great point to start with any type of empathetic journey, especially with another, is to ask if they actually need the help, or if they want the help, or if they, need the rope or whatever.
And what help looks like for them, right? If I'm working with Chad, Chad's the expert on Chad. I may have an idea of what help may look like, but he's going to be able to guide that journey far better than I will.
I like that a lot. I have a kind of a larger question on that.
Before
Sean,
we
go ahead,
step into a different question, sorry.
Absolutely.
So I think that I'm not going to disagree with anyone. In fact, specifically, I'm not going to disagree with you, Johnny, because your point is correct. However, I think that there's a little bit of nuance in there. And to Chance, as you just said, that's the reason I'm jumping in. I think before you try to figure out if you're the right person to help someone, or if this person that you're trying to help is the right person for you to help, I think you got to figure out yourself first. You got to figure out what your state of empathy is. You got to figure out even what the word means to some degree. And so just like a military operation, you got to understand your left and right subarcs, and you've got to understand the ground that you're standing on. So figure out what your baseline set of empathy skills are, or your abilities as an empath to some degree, and understand when you're doing it really bad and when you're doing it really well, whatever that means to you. And so the example, as Clay stated, was, if you're out there to support a friend and the friend's doing like unbelievably well, somehow maybe Clay feels jealous. I'm creating a scenario here. I'm not saying that that happened. But if Clay starts feeling those feelings, someone will say, dude, don't do that. That's a bummer. What a jerk you are. However, I disagree. That's Clay understanding his left and rights of arcs. That's Clay tuning into, whoa, hang on a sec. I'm a little bit off arc here. I need to tighten up my arc, and I need to better understand where I best operate empathically well for the people around me and for myself. So I think Clay has to understand his baseline and his left and rights of arcs before he can go out and even consider helping someone else. I mean, maybe someone falls into a trajectory from maybe the age of 15 or whatever it is, and they're a natural empath, we'll call it, or they have a slight gift, and then over a period of time, they developed a skill set to turn them into a really good empath. And then off they go for the rest of their life. They never understand what their baseline is or their left or right of arc, and they just naturally are helpful to everyone around them. I don't think that that's that common. I think that people who are providing empathy for others, it's hit and miss. It's sometimes done well, it's sometimes done poorly. And I don't think that it has to be that way if someone just understands their baseline, their own left and right of arc, and dial in their arc of fire so that it's appropriate for the person in front of them with the skill sets that you have in your baseline. And the only way you can figure out what your baseline is to start thinking about your baseline. What are you right now? What do you bring to the table within yourself and for others, if in fact you even want to try and help someone else? If you're out there trying to help the entire universe, and at your core, you don't want to help anyone, not only is it disingenuous for others, you know that that's going to create that cognitive dissonance within you. You're going to feel inauthentic. One of the things that drives me, the reason I started this topic right now, is one of the things that drives me crazy, is the overly compassionate empathy. But what do I mean by overly compassionate? I mean, for me, when someone's like, all about the warm milk and honey, wrapping me in the warm blanket, giving me all the hugs, patting me on the head way too much. Sometimes it's just too much. I don't need that much compassion. There's a line in the sand where now you're irritating me by being overly compassionate. And I mean that over-exaggerated compassion where it's artificial. And so I think that there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it for a guy like me. And if that person in front of me is trying to give me some form of empathetic help, well, I hope that they really understand who they are and how to do it well, rather than this is their fun little life experiment that they're dabbling in and kind of doing wrong to some degree. So the responsibility to learn yourself, your own abilities to help other human beings, I think is a much more important aspect of your life than some people understand. In fact, it's such a responsibility that I just wanted to call it out as a great responsibility.
Absolutely. That kind of goes into my question, but I want to make sure everybody else has an opportunity on this one. Clay, you got any thoughts on what John just covered?
No, the main thing, and it's just kind of doubling down on his point, is I feel like people who are overly compassionate, what makes it feel overly compassionate is both Johnny and Sean have brought this word up more than once, is a lack of authenticity. And that authenticity, it has to be genuine. And the only way to genuinely be authentic is to know yourself, like Sean was saying. So I just wanted to add that small point.
Absolutely. Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, I'm a big proponent of the old psychedelics, and with that being talked about, and me and my wife, being very vulnerable about our stuff, right? We get a lot of people that reach out, say, hey, can you connect me with this foundation, or can you connect me with a ketamine clinic, and things of that nature. And so I always kind of remind my wife, and she reminds me of, hey, we got to make sure our porch is clean first before we can go out and help everybody else out. So we always try to come back to, our foundation and our, what are we dealing with personally? Can we take on somebody else to help them? And, to Sean, same thing. I just kind of, a lot of the guys that reach out to me, I get nitty gritty with it. There's no hugs and pats on the booty and thing of that nature. It's like, are you being a jerk? Okay, well, why are you being a jerk? And how can we clean this up quicker? I don't coddle it. Because I think a lot of us, if we just get the slap across the face and we really get told like, hey, this is what's going to go on, this can better your life. I think a lot of people take that in, especially like the military personnel, right? Like, just tell us direct, like, what do we got to do to move this solution forward? So, a lot of different, really good points there, but definitely on that same boat of rowing with Sean on there of like, let's not coddle it too much, because people still got to put some work in, and you got to call that out. So, my biggest takeaway is clean your porch, make sure your foundation's strong so you can help others.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to play pickleball later, right?
Facts.
Or get friends who like to clean other people's porches. So my porch is a little dusty right now, buddy, and if you want to come up and clean my porch, then I'm going to be empathy all day long for you.
Power washer and broom, here I come,
There
buddy.
you go. Yeah. John, you got any points on that? Or before I posit this thought?
I think it was well hammered by the crew. I'm good.
Okay. So my initial thoughts on empathy was, I think similar to most people's thoughts on empathy was that it really is more of an external thing, right? Like, I'm going to be empathetic to someone else. And then, but over the course of this conversation, my thoughts have changed a little bit in that what I see now as the bridge of empathy is to bridge our own concept of our emotional state in that moment. So it's like the ability to be empathetic bridges my ego. The ability to be empathetic towards other people is what allows me to bridge past my jealousy, or bridge past my compassion, or bridge whatever that word is, whatever that emotion is that you're feeling. To be truly empathetic is to bridge your own emotions first, so that you can be there for that person. So I just want to get your guys' thoughts on, you think that's a accurate assessment, or do you think that it's something else? John, I'm going to go to you first.
I think based on how you laid it out, for me, I would be 100% agreement. It really just speaks to the concept of self-awareness. I know as a human being, as a man, how I'm going to engage with certain people, regardless of where they're at in their life. On the professional side of the house, it is not about me. And so I ask very direct questions and Clay will tell you this, and the hundreds of warfighters I've been so blessed to be able to work with. I ask very direct questions to avoid the assumptions. I'll ask somebody like you, Chance, or Sean, or Chad, how do you prefer to be coached? Right? How do you prefer to be coached? Because I want to avoid, first of all, I don't want to waste time. I don't want to waste time. People's lives literally matter and are critically important for me to do as much work as we can, correct work, in as little time as possible, so that they can fill the pages of their book in any way they see fit. The only way I'm going to be able to do that with them is if we can develop rapport, trust, and I ask them, how are you best coached? And so that means being aware enough of what I'm good at and what I'm not. And so if Clay says to me, hey, this is something I'm really struggling with, just because I'm the mental health guy or mental performance specialist, that may not be in my wheelhouse. And I have to be honest enough with him, because truly his life could depend on it. I have to be honest enough with him to say, brother, I don't know that I can be as effective for you as you have earned, but let's walk that road together and find somebody who can. So to answer your question directly, I agree with you, Chance, 100%. Self-awareness is critical in every situation we encounter in life, no more so than we're dealing with somebody we love and care about as it relates to their mental health. We cannot solve everyone's problems, but because we have certain titles or labels or experiences, our ego gets in the way and we think we can do it all. And that's where we get in trouble. And that's where we have the potential to hurt other people as well.
Yeah.
So self-awareness is critical. And I think it goes back too to, you segue beautifully into what Sean was talking about earlier. Am I even the right guy with the rope? Like, am I even the dude that should have the rope? And by the way, on the way down, do I even know what I'm doing? Am I going to bust my rear end on the way down trying to feel with this guy? Right. So yes, I agree with you 100%. It's critically important. The skill of self-awareness is critically important, especially in this work.
Love that. Clay, you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So and you can fact check me, but this is interesting. Just to connect these dots real quick, Chad, psychedelics at one point, I think in the early 80s, were actually called empathogens, and they might still be called that in some way or another. So it's kind of interesting to bridge those. But yeah, empathy as a bridge to understand yourself and your ego as a concept it's a pivotal concept for me. I'm gonna take that one. I'm stealing that from you. And I'm
It's all
taking
yours.
it because that's a really, really interesting way, because like one thing I do not like is cliches, and self-awareness to me is like a word and a thing that it just can be very cliche these days. And it's, you don't really understand like, well how do I do this self-awareness thing? Some people don't like meditating, some people don't. But so where is this self-awareness, and how do I find it? How do I get it? And now that we're talking about it and we're kind of figuring out like, oh, you know what, maybe empathy is the bridge or is the tool that helps me filter myself so I can reduce or subordinate my ego, and I can understand my emotions before I try to climb down this rope and help this person. I think that as a concept is it's an amazing concept that we've kind of all filtered through. I really like it.
That's awesome. Chad, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to the journey, and I'm still in the beginning stages of it. I had to become self-aware of all my failures, right, and all my bad habits before I could even raise the flag that I'm here to help everybody else. So I mean, nail on head, agree 100%. Everyone else is right on spot with it. I don't think I need to add much more to that.
Solid. Sean, coming to you last on this one. What are your thoughts?
Well, I am going to add some more, Chad. And so,
Mic drop. Mic drop.
Well, it's well.
why
I
he's got
hope
a
it
mic
is.
stand.
I hope it is because it's about you. So you just said that you're still early in the journey of figuring the empathic route out, or figuring yourself out. Early days, in a sense of the totality of the journey, and maybe not. It doesn't much matter where you are in the journey, because I want to make this point really, really clear. I think that a lot of folks out there subordinate themselves to this process of being better at connecting with other human beings by categorizing themselves as still early in the journey. And it makes sense. I mean, it's an easy thing to cognitively leap to, that I'm only on day one. What can I do for others? However, I disagree. So I'm using you as the precise example, Chad, because from time to time, I am on the BJJ mats wearing your no-gi gear, the Chatterific, conquer your inner world, etc., etc. No-gi rash guard and no-gi shorts. And the moment that I'm on the mats wearing those, do you know who I connect with? You, buddy. I think of you. Whenever I put that on, I think of you. So when I'm rolling on the mats, you're not constantly on my mind, but I'm connected to you, empathically, digitally, long distance, however you want to think of it, but I am connected to you in that moment. When I'm putting it on, I think of you. When I'm taking it off, I think of you. Now let's not get all weird, but I do think of you. And so there is a way that you have connected to people around us that whether you're on day one or day three, it doesn't much matter. That is now an empathetic connection across time and space. Now, looking at the panel, I'll challenge you all with a question. Please raise your hand if you feel disconnected from this conversation right now. Well, great. That was the expectation I had. I didn't expect anyone to feel disconnected from this conversation. Why are we all empathically connected right now? Why are we feeling each other's feels right now? But so few can out there on the regular sidewalk. Why is that? Is it because we all see eye to eye? Is it because we have commonality through shared experiences? Is it because we all walk in the same circle of friends? What is it? I'm going to throw that out to you guys right now. Why do we feel connected right now?
Let's start with Chad, because we're talking about you anyway.
Oh, because I clicked on the email link you sent me. I think that's about how I connected with you guys.
Clever.
Yeah, no, I think there's a myriad of probably different variables that connects us and why we're here, but I think the biggest one for me is we all share some sort of experiences, which means we share some kind of feelings or gratitude or hate or ego or something with any of those situations that probably happened in the past or current. And we all somewhere along the line have some kind of relatability, right? And I think any conversation I've ever had on the collective, it's all about how do we become better human beings in general, right? It's always leading back to that. How can we be better? And being on part of this collective, it's like I said, I'm learning from each individual. It's every time that's on these are ones that I listen to as I'm working out, and that just brings me closer in. But as far as a connection, I think logging on and being present, for me and following you guys and realizing your stories and what you're going through.
That's a great way to put it. Clay, what do you think?
I think that the reason we can all be connected, especially in this conversation, it could be a lot of things, but in a lot of ways, I don't think that we can always or necessarily get to choose being empathetic. I think it happens and it's part of life. And for some people, it may be overwhelming to be empathetic. But in this instance, what helps us all be connected or to come together is intentionality. We all of us on here, we want to see things more clearly from our own perspective. And in order to do that, we have to hear and understand the people. So we're connected because we want to understand both our world and the world of others more clearly, just as a fundamental trait of being human. And some people intentionally try to do that, and some people don't. And I think for us, why we feel connected is because all of us really want to understand each other and others on a more significant level than just baseline, and share it.
That's a great point. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think first and foremost for me, I would echo what Clay shared. Can only speak for myself as an individual, but I have really an insatiable, it's almost an obsession to learn more about the way people think, feel, act. And obviously, and selfishly that helps me with my work. But it helps me so much with my own journey as well. And so when I get together with a group of people like you all, the way I was describing it to somebody a couple weeks ago, I think Clay and I spoke shortly after I was on. It's like, man, it was the best hour of school I can remember having in such a long time. When you're around people that are striving to grow and get better in whatever lane is most specific for them, you can't help but grow and get better, or you will not stay welcomed in that group of people. And I love that about high standards and difficult conversations, because that's really, I think, the pathway to real growth. And I think the second piece that brings us all is probably for you guys more than I can viscerally understand, is this for a lot of you, I would imagine, is an extension of your service. It's an extension of your selfless service. If I can touch another human being through my work on the collective, and if I can touch just one person and get them to reflect in a different way, I think that's the platform that you all have created, is that we're going to continue to selflessly serve our brothers and sisters in ways that are different than we did downrange, but in ways that we think can be life-changing nonetheless. And that's what I love so much about my work with the military community in general. The amount of altruism and genuine love and desire to help, to really help their brothers and sisters, is like no organization that I've ever worked in. And I've coached across professional sports teams, many professional athletes, corporate people. There's nothing like what you and your brothers and sisters bring to an environment. And I think the reason for that is because you have been through things that the 1% of the 1% understand at a visceral level. And so to be let into that community is probably the single greatest honor of my life. But I think I'm here on the collective, and I think we're all here in some way because we want to continue to give back. We want to touch somebody's head and heart, and maybe get them to think about a very common struggle in a different way. That's what this has done for me anyways. In the twice that I've been on and all the ones I've listened to, that has been the common denominator.
I like that. To answer your question, Sean, I think personally, I look at it because we all care. At the core root of it all, we all care about other people. We care not only more, even maybe beyond ourselves. In that same thing, to echo kind of what everybody's saying, is that we want to be of service, we want to be engaged, but more than anything else, we actually care. And too often in the world, I think we see a lot of flippancy, but really, we just care. We really
Well, I
want.
dig that because I got to steal the host position now and carry on with the further conversation that I've been chewing on in parallel processing for the last 50 minutes. And it's this, you stated it, Chance. Does a person have to care so much for themselves before they can care for someone else? Or can you care for someone else before you start caring for yourself? Personally, I think they both all paths lead to Rome, as the old saying goes. But I think you got to choose. You got to choose one or the other. I suppose you could choose both. It doesn't much matter what path you're walking on, but you gotta step into it. You got to start either caring for yourself, or you got to start caring for others, or maybe both simultaneously. But you got to start. And so I don't think a bridge will be built towards Rome until you start executing or actioning the first step of trying to figure out what empathy means to you, or what empathy means for someone else, as it were. What do you guys think?
Great questions. This is, I guess you could just take over for me. I mean, that's all good.
I just did. What do you
just
think?
did. I'm going to pass it off to one of the guests right away. John, what do you think?
Oh man, I was hoping that one wouldn't land here first. So, Sean, I think I'm tracking what you're asking, and I personally believe that both can and really should happen at the same time. I think, going back to the previous question you asked, why are we all here on the collective? What is the intent of the collective? I think all of us shared the amount of growth we get personally from being on, but also the opportunity that it presents to maybe help someone else who we may never see, talk to, be able to hug, have a conversation with, but they're out there. They're out there and they're listening. And maybe something that you shared, or Chad shared, or Clay, or Chance, maybe something will sit with them and help them reflect differently. And so I think as we walk this road, whether it's around the skill of empathy or the practice of self-awareness, whether it's grit, whether it's a shift in mindset as it relates to learning. I believe that any of the gifts that we've been given, either through accumulation of knowledge, experience, life, or that have been freely given to us by others, I believe we have a responsibility to pass those on, to freely pass those on. And so I would answer your question that I think ideally we can do both simultaneously.
I like that. Clay, what do you think?
That's a tough one because I like the both answer. Johnny, way to cop out of that one.
That's how I feel, brother. That's how I feel, man.
No,
cool.
just joking.
But I've also learned enough. I've also learned enough to say I can't be that person right now. Like I'm okay
Yeah.
with that today, and I
Yeah,
never
kind of-
used to be.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going too. Is to care for yourself or to care for others first. I guess it really is dependent upon, you know, where is the person that is doing the caring or vice versa, where are they at? Because if a person isn't steadfast and strong on their values and their ethics and their morals, they may have to learn how to do that by caring for others first. But if you are somewhat, you know, because we could never be 100% ethical or more, you know, we're human, we're fallible in a lot of ways. But if I am strong in my values and my ethics and my character is strong, consistent character from the Status Friend in the Chess podcast, then you may want to be there to help and care for others because you have a sturdiness that you could lend or a rope. So it's kind of, I guess mine's kind of a cop out too. I was talking trash to Johnny, but it depends on where the person's at in their own personal journey. And Johnny says it all the time. You can't pour from an empty cup. So if you don't have it, you can't pour and help others. So it really depends on an honest assessment by an individual of where are you in your current state.
Yeah. Chad, what are your thoughts?
I mean, call it a cop out, but I mean, I'm right there with Clay and John as well. I mean, it makes sense, right? I think you can do both at the same time, but like I said, I think it comes back to realizing where you're at, right? If my front porch is in order and everything's clean, okay, I've got some bandwidth to help some other people. If my front porch is a complete disaster, I don't have bandwidth to help anybody because I still got to go clean my front porch. So I think it can be done simultaneously, but you know, the cogs in the wheel, everything's got to align, I think, too, because you can't be out there helping people when your home is a complete mess. You know, you're a bad dad, you're a bad husband, or whatnot. But yet you got all this great info and advice for everybody else. You know, so I think it can be done, but it's got to come back to you, and it's got to come back to that ownership of, you know, is my house in order before I can go help anybody else. I think you really got to have your stuff dialed in.
Yeah, I'm going to agree and disagree with everybody. I don't think it can be done at the same time. I think you can do both, but I don't think they can be done at the same time. It has to be one or the other. You can be working on yourself, or you could be working on others. But I think it has to be, you know, just kind of what you said there, Chad, is you have to have your house in order. Now, that doesn't mean everything needs to be perfect. It just means you need to have something in order to be able to speak to that for others. But if you are working with others, you can then apply that to yourself as well. But I think it has to be one and then the other. I don't think it can be at the same time, because then it's just an amalgamation of everything. You're trying to fix yourself and help other people, and it would become too much. My view on it. Sean, what are your thoughts on it?
I
Sean
don't-
won't have any. Sean won't have any.
He's got no thoughts.
No, he won't. Sean won't have any thoughts on this.
No.
Well, there's no right or wrong answer. I don't have a right or a wrong answer. I think my main point would be this: you've just got to step forward into one or the other. Choose one, even if you're going to do one wrong. doing one wrong is better than not doing anything on the subject. If you want to understand empathy, you got to step into it to try to figure it out. Figure it out through others, or figure it out through yourself, or figure it out combined. To get better at something, you got to step into that something. So I don't really have a formed opinion on this. It was just a random question that was bubbling up in my head. What I think the takeaway from this is there's several different ways that you can do it. We heard different ways just now, and different orders of priority, different approaches, different sort of cerebral aspects of the question answer. So I think that anyone out there who's picking a side, there is no side. Just feel it out, step into it. You'll figure out the rest through your own intelligence and through those around you helping to shape your answer, as it were.
Yeah. I'm going to push back on you a little bit there, Sean. I don't think you have random questions.
No, I don't.
So to state that, I just
What a jerk.
I have one comment here from Winterstorm I want to hit because it goes to your question, Sean. He says, you have to believe first that you're worth it to work on yourself, to show empathy to yourself before you can effectively show it to others. So again, it goes to your point. There's multiple ways to look at it. There's multiple ways to do it. And this is a great point too. You got to believe you're worth it at the core of it to begin any of these things. Now we are just a little bit over time. Let's get some final thoughts on the bridges of empathy or in general on anything we've gone over so far. I'm going to start with you, Clay. What do you think? Some final thoughts on empathy.
No, my final thoughts are it's multifaceted, it's complex. It takes probably more than one conversation that 4 people have, 5 people have, and to do for anyone listening and for ourselves to do the internal work. It's worth it. And discussing and thinking about empathy and where you lie and where you're at is really the entire point. It just is. So that's my final thought.
Like it. Chad, what are your thoughts? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to communication, and meeting people where they're at, right, and meeting them for what they need. My biggest thing is I know my wife's always kind of pinged out, right, from being mama bear to working to helping with Mental Joe. So my things are always, how can I help you? How can I ease your load? So communication, I think in order to be empathetic, you've got to have the communication, like John said earlier. How can I help you? Where can I meet you at? So.
I like that. John, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me from this discussion, especially, is I really want to begin asking myself the same questions that I would ask others. And I really want to think about how I leverage conversations and questioning with people that I love and care about by asking myself the same questions first. What would it look like to be supported through this struggle? What would it look like to be supported in this time of discomfort? I think when we can start honestly asking ourselves those questions and answering them honestly, we may be more well equipped to help others do the same.
100%. Sean, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think basically in my head I've had not a vision per se, but an image in my head, and it has been someone standing on top of a high point, throwing a rope down to someone in a hole in the dark. And so someone is in the light, throwing a rope down to someone in the dark. That rope represents the bridge of empathy, as we've already stated. But I do believe that rope could be your life. And that person on top and that person below could be you and you. It could be one and the same. And so throughout our lives, we have the yin and yang, the duality of life. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. So at the times that we're up and the times that we're down, does the person down expect ourselves to throw a rope down to ourselves, or are we going to throw a non-existent rope up to the person up there? How does that all work? And so if we consider it being two different people it's an easy equation to figure out. But if the person up top and the person down below is us in both instances, it's our job to figure out which one we are at that time and how to best manage that rope of life, as it were.
That is a fantastic analogy from the king of analogies, I have to say. And I just want to say, I'm going to make it a little bit weird, but Chad, I was thinking of you when I put this on today, just so you know. And I don't know if I could make it any more weird than when Sean said he was taking his shirt off and thinking of you, but we'll keep going with that. For any of the people listening, I do want to hear your thoughts. Make sure you put, what you believe empathy is and how you can engage in empathetic behavior in the comments. We do read them all. Make sure you guys put them up there so we can get your thoughts on it as well. John, Chad, Clay, and Sean, thank you guys so much. It's been a great conversation. I think we've touched on quite a lot of what empathy is. And again, scratching the surface once again, only an hour for such a deep conversation. I do really appreciate it. As we all learn what empathy is, I think that allows us to then build the bridges that span those gaps, which allows us to grow into the people that we're meant to be. And you can do that with us every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow.